Imagine this for a second. A child is born and raised in one of China's huge, gleaming megacities. They go to school there, they play with their friends there, they speak the local dialect. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're a city kid. But in the eyes of the state, their future was pretty much decided, maybe even sealed, the moment they were born. Because sitting right next to them in class is another child who seems, well, identical. They live in the same city, go to the same school, probably dream the same dreams. But the system sees these two children as fundamentally different people. And because of that, they're set on two completely different life paths. So how is that even possible? Well, it all comes down to this. On the left, you've got a child with what's called an urban hukou. For them, the path is open. But on the right, a child with a rural hukou, even though they live in the exact same city, faces a whole series of locked doors. It's all because of one single piece of paper, an administrative status they're given at birth that sets them on two totally different futures. Okay, so to really understand this split, we need to dive into the mechanism that's actually behind it all, a system known as hukou. So yeah, this system is called hukou, and it's so important to get this straight. This is not just a residence permit or proof of address. The best way to think about it is as a social passport. It doesn't just say where you live, it dictates what rights you have, your access to the most basic public services that, make up a modern life. And here's the thing. This system was no accident. It was a very deliberate design. It was formally set up way back in 1958. Now, the official goal was all about social order, but the real goal, the practical purpose, was to control the population, to keep the rural workforce out in the countryside, and to concentrate all the state's resources, like jobs, food, and housing, in the cities for a very select group. And what that did was create this fundamental split that is still very much alive today. The urban hukou, for the people considered insiders, and the rural hukou, for those who are, by design, outsiders, even when they live and work in the very cities that they helped build. So what does this actually mean for someone with a rural hukou who might have spent their entire life in a big city? What does this life of disadvantage actually look like day to day? It's really just a cascade of consequences. You can't get into the best local high schools, which pretty much locks you out of the top universities. You're barred from stable government jobs. You have really limited access to public health care. You can't get housing subsidies. And get this, your parents might even have to pay these crazy high borrowed study fees just so you can go to the local public school. This quote from an anonymous post on Chinese social media, it just perfectly captures that feeling of helplessness. Effort was meaningless. I was checkmated at birth. It's this deep, profound sense that it doesn't matter how hard you work, the game was rigged against you from the very first move. And you've got to understand, this isn't just a one-time thing you have to overcome. It's more like a compounding sentence of exclusion. At every single major turning point in your life, schooling, getting a job, starting a family, the system is right there, ready to remind you of your status with yet another closed door. The personal toll is just immense. It creates this deep, unspoken sense of defeat that can literally tear families apart. You have kids blaming their parents, asking, why didn't you change our hukou? All while the parents are just crushed by this guilt of not being able to protect their own children from a fate that they themselves couldn't escape. But surely there has to be a way out, right? I mean, a system this rigid must have some kind of escape hatch. And well, officially, it does. On paper, you see these pathways. Get a great education, become a high taxpayer, work in a certain city for a long time, or marry someone who has that coveted urban hukou. They seem like achievable goals, right? Like a light at the end of the tunnel. But in reality, and this is the big catch, these gates aren't controlled by consistent, fair rules that you can plan for. Nope, they're controlled by what the source material calls the moment's convenience. Local governments can and absolutely do change the requirements whenever they want, making them tougher when the city gets too crowded or maybe the budget gets tight. And that just completely changes the whole idea of merit. As this quote explains it so well, for most people, it's not a wall you can climb with sheer effort. It's just the scenery in the background of a few lottery-like success stories. It keeps up this illusion that the system is fair, when for millions and millions of people, it's anything but. So let's zoom out a bit. After all these decades, what has this system of really internal segregation done to the very fabric of Chinese society? The result is this widespread, quiet social decay. For rural and migrant workers, it leads to resignation, to political silence. For the city dwellers, it can create an unconscious sense of privilege. For the youth, it creates a deep cynicism, this feeling that effort is pointless. And for the parents' generation, it leads to a kind of self-censorship, where they turn their anger inward, on themselves, instead of at the state. And what's more, the system basically breaks society apart. Instead of encouraging people to band together and demand fairness, it forces every single person into this frantic, individual search for their own personal loophole, a private way out. And you can't have solidarity when the only rational thing to do is just try to save yourself. Okay, let's get to the final and maybe the most damning assessment of this whole system, because its true nature is really what makes it so powerful. This isn't some kind of hidden conspiracy. The laws are public. The system operates completely in plain sight. Its cruelty isn't in its secrecy. It's in its open, bureaucratic, and just mundane application every single day. This is exactly how systemic violence works. It doesn't need to physically attack you. It doesn't arrest you. It doesn't put you on trial. It just quietly and relentlessly suffocates your potential by stealing your choices one by one. So the real pain of the hukou system, these so-called moments of hell, they aren't one single dramatic event. They're the thousands of quiet rejections that add up over a lifetime. It's the school application you can't submit, the job you can't apply for, maybe even the person you can't marry, all because of a status you were handed at birth. And this all leads us to the source's incredibly powerful conclusion. The hukou system is China's most violent because it crushes human potential on a massive scale. It's the most mundane because it just operates through paperwork and bureaucracy. And it's the most difficult to deny because it's all justified with words like order and stability. And that leaves us with this final, really unsettling question. When a system can basically declare checkmate on your life from the moment you're born, what does personal effort truly mean? What is its value then?